My name is Isabella Reed, 28 years old. All my life, I thought love was something you could earn. That if you worked hard enough, smiled often enough, stayed small and agreeable long enough, eventually someone would notice. Eventually, my parents would look at me the way they looked at my sister, Cheryl, as if she hung in the constellations. I used to picture it. The moment I'd walk down the aisle, my parents standing proud, maybe even tearful. Ruth would clasp her pearls and say, "That's my daughter," and Joseph would finally soften, realizing I'd built something worthy of his approval. But when the day came, those chairs, the ones I'd set aside for them in the front row, stayed empty. The ceremony was small, intimate, set by the riverside restaurant Michael and I loved. Soft string lights draped above us, reflecting off the water like stars pretending to join us. The scent of roses and vanilla candles filled the air, mingling with the late spring breeze. Nicole stood near the aisle, camera in hand, calling out tiny directions to me like she always did. "Shoulders back, Izzy. Own it." I tried to smile for her lens, but I kept glancing at those empty chairs. Michael caught my eye, his steady calm grounding me. His parents, George and Diane Foster, sat beaming. Diane even teared up as I walked toward them. It should have been enough. Love was everywhere, except in the one place I'd spent my life trying to find it. The ceremony was beautiful. Everyone said so. The vows, the laughter, the way Michael's thumb brushed away my tears when I stumbled over my words. But when the music faded, the ache returned. I found myself searching faces again, as if Ruth and Joseph might suddenly appear, realizing what they'd missed. They didn't. Later, at the reception, I tried to bury the disappointment under toasts and laughter. Nicole danced with Michael's uncle, barefoot and tipsy, on champagne. George told everyone stories about Michael's clumsy college years. Diane hugged me so tightly, I almost believed I belonged to her family completely. Then, during the final dance, my phone buzzed. I shouldn't have checked it, but old habits die slow. A social media notification blinked at me. A new post from my mother. The caption read, "Celebrating our star's engagement in paradise." My stomach turned. I clicked before I could stop myself. There they were, Joseph, Ruth, Cheryl, and her fiancé Jeffrey, all smiling beneath the gold Hawaiian sunset. My mother in her silk dress, my father holding a drink, Cheryl radiant in white, like the world was hers to inherit. They were toasting, laughing, posing for the camera as if my wedding day didn't exist at all. I felt the air leave my lungs. The music around me blurred, laughter muffled. Nicole's camera flash went off somewhere to my left. Michael turned just in time to see my expression freeze. He walked over, concern tightening his face. What happened? I handed him the phone with shaking hands. His jaw clenched as he read. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then, softly, "You don't deserve this, Izzy. You never did." Nicole appeared behind him, saw the screen, and let out a low whistle. "Hawaii? On your wedding day?" Her voice cracked in disbelief. "They're monsters." I didn't cry right away. I just stared at the photo, their smiles so bright they almost looked fake. The kind of happiness you perform when you need the world to think you're perfect. I walked out to the terrace, where the night air was cool and the moon hung low over the Maumee River. The laughter from inside drifted through the open doors, muffled, distant. My reflection shimmered on the water, pale and blurred. Nicole joined me quietly, placing a shawl over my shoulders. "You're allowed to be angry," she whispered. "I'm not angry," I said, though the lie caught in my throat. "I just finally understand." "Understand what?" "That they were never going to choose me," I said. "Not even on the one day I thought they might." She didn't argue. She just stood beside me, her presence enough. Inside, the DJ changed the song. A slow, tender one Michael and I had chosen weeks before, imagining we'd dance under our parents' smiles. He came to the terrace and extended his hand. "Come on," he said softly. "Don't let them take this moment from you too." I hesitated, then placed my hand in his. He pulled me close, and we swayed beneath the night sky. His breath brushed against my ear as he whispered, "You have a family now, Isabella. You built it yourself." Something inside me cracked open. Not the kind of breaking that destroys, but the kind that finally lets the light in. When the music ended, I looked back at the dark water one more time. My reflection wavered, then steadied. I whispered to it, to the little girl who once waited for applause that never came. "They don't get to define me anymore." And though the ache still pulsed like an old bruise, I knew the first thread had finally snapped. the invisible tether that kept me seeking love in a place it would never grow. That night, as we left the venue, I turned off my phone, not in anger, but in peace. I grew up in a picture-perfect postcard, a neat, middle-class neighborhood in Toledo, Ohio, where every house looked identical, every smile rehearsed. My parents, Joseph and Ruth Reed, cared about one thing more than love: appearances. The lawn was always trimmed, the curtains always matched, and every family photo was cropped to fit their narrative of success. And in that narrative, Cheryl, my older sister, was the headline. Even as a child, I understood the hierarchy of our home. Cheryl was the golden child, the prodigy with charm and ambition, the future lawyer my parents bragged about to neighbors. I was the afterthought, the quiet one with ink-stained fingers and a sketchbook instead of a spotlight. One summer afternoon, when I was 10, I ran into the living room clutching a certificate, first place, elementary art fair. My drawing, a city skyline bursting with color, had been chosen out of hundreds. I remember holding it up, heart pounding, waiting for pride to appear on their faces. Dad barely looked up from the newspaper. "That's nice, Isabella," he muttered, before turning to Cheryl. "Did you finish your debate outline?" She smiled, confident as always. "Of course." Mom clapped her hands. "That's my girl. You'll be unstoppable in high school." They didn't mean to hurt me. That's what I told myself. They were just busy. Cheryl's trophies needed arranging. Her medals needed new hooks for the living room wall. My certificate ended up tucked in a kitchen drawer, buried under grocery lists. That became the rhythm of my childhood. Cheryl's victories were celebrated with parties and photo albums. Mine were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. When I was 14, my school hosted an art exhibition, my first real show. I spent weeks preparing, sketching late into the night, hands smudged with charcoal. I imagined them walking in, proud smiles lighting up the gym as they saw my name beside my work. They didn't come. "Work's been hectic," Mom said the next morning, pouring coffee like it was nothing. Meanwhile, Cheryl's every achievement earned parades of praise. When she was accepted into her first pre-law program, my parents threw a backyard party complete with balloons that read, "Future Attorney at Law." I stood at the window, pretending to study the stars while they toasted to her bright future. I'd never seen them so happy. I don't think I ever saw them that happy for me. That night, lying in bed, I made a silent vow. I won't keep begging to be seen. But vows made by children have a way of bending under time. High school blurred into years of the same pattern, Cheryl conquering every room she entered, and me learning to disappear quietly into the corners. When I told my parents I'd been accepted into a graphic design program at a local gallery, Dad barely paused before saying, "That's nice, but don't get distracted. Art isn't a career, Isabella." Then he smiled proudly and added, "Did you know Cheryl might get a clerkship this summer?" I learned that "that's nice" was code for not enough. It was my art teacher, Mr. Ellis, who changed everything. He stopped by my desk one afternoon, studying the poster I was designing for the school fair. "You know," he said, "some people chase approval their whole lives and never catch it. But you've got something rare. You build worlds. Don't waste it." His words hit harder than any praise I'd ever heard at home. They became a quiet anthem in my head, a reminder that my worth wasn't theirs to measure. By 17, I'd started keeping my achievements to myself. I worked on my portfolio in secret, turning pain into colors and lines. When I finally earned a scholarship for college, I told them during dinner, hoping for a flicker of pride. Mom blinked, then smiled absently. "That's nice, honey, but remember to be practical." A week later, I overheard her telling a neighbor, "Cheryl's our ticket to a better life. She's going places." I sat on the stairs holding one of my sketchbooks, my fingers trembling. Ticket to a better life. I guess that made me the layover, the forgettable stop between their plans and her glory. That night, I packed my sketch pads and supplies into a worn backpack, whispering to myself, "You can't make people see you if they're committed to being blind." The next morning, I mailed in my acceptance forms for the university's design program. No ceremony, no announcement. It wasn't rebellion, it was survival. As I sealed the envelope, I realized something simple but devastating. Love shouldn't have to be earned through perfection. And maybe the only way to stop chasing it was to leave the race entirely. College was supposed to be my reset button, a clean slate far from the suffocating hierarchy of the Reed household. When I arrived at the University of Ohio, the dorm hall smelled like new paint and possibility. For the first time in my life, no one knew me as Cheryl's sister. I was just Isabella, It felt like stepping out from under a shadow that had followed me my entire life. The design studios became my sanctuary. White walls, splashed with half-finished posters, tables covered in paint-stained mugs and tangled charging cables. I'd lose hours hunched over my tablet, building logos and layouts, my world shrinking to colors, shapes, and quiet ambition. That's where I met Michael Foster. He was a graduate teaching assistant, a few years older, always dressed in charcoal sweaters and soft patience. He had this way of studying people like he was reading more than just their words. When he first saw my work, he said, "You think in layers. Most people only see the surface." It wasn't flirting, at least not at first. It was recognition, the kind I'd been starving for. And then there was Nicole Hayes, a photography major with streaks of blue in her hair and a laugh that could shake the dust off any bad day. She became my first real friend, the kind who showed up uninvited, stole fries off my plate, and forced me to take breaks between projects. "Art's supposed to express life," she'd say, snapping photos of me mid-yawn at 2 a.m. "Not erase it." With Michael and Nicole, I began to feel something new. Seen. Those years weren't easy. I worked late nights, balancing freelance gigs with assignments, driven by something I couldn't name. A mix of hunger and defiance. Every email from my parents was a reminder that I was still the family's footnote. Mom would write, "Hope school's going fine. Cheryl's been offered another internship in DC. So proud of her." Not a single question about my work. Not one. When I landed my first internship at a local design studio, I called home, my voice trembling with excitement. "Dad, I'm going to be working on real projects. Branding, digital campaigns. It's a big opportunity." He paused, distracted. "That's nice. But have you heard from Cheryl? She just argued her first mock trial." I forced a smile he couldn't see. "That's great for her." I hung up and stared at the silent phone for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and kept designing. That became my rhythm. Pour every ounce of rejection into creation. Each ignored phone call became a new sketch. Each empty conversation, another layer of color. By junior year, Michael and I had drifted closer. Long talks that blurred into late-night walks. Critiques that turned into confessions. He never pushed, never rushed. One night, after reviewing a set of mock-up designs, he looked at me and said quietly, "You have a way of making even pain look intentional." I laughed softly. It's the only thing I've ever had control over. He didn't argue, he just nodded, understanding. When my first campaign, a small branding project for a local coffee shop, was featured on a Toledo design blog, I felt like the world had finally cracked open a little. I sent the link to my parents with shaking hands. Hours later, Dad replied with a single sentence. "That's nice, but have you talked to Cheryl? She's working on a big case this month." The words stung, sharper than I'd expected. I showed Nicole the message, and she just scoffed. "They don't deserve front row seats to your life, Izzy." Michael, ever calm, said, "Stop trying to hand your worth to people who keep dropping it." Their words sank deep, like gentle truths I wasn't ready to admit yet. The more I succeeded, the more invisible I became in my family's eyes, but the less it hurt. Because for the first time, I had people who noticed. Nicole showed up at my presentations with confetti and loud cheers. Michael would leave notes on my desk. "Your work made me rethink color today." Those small gestures built a foundation stronger than all the hollow compliments I'd spent years chasing. By my senior year, I had a full-time job offer from a mid-sized agency waiting after graduation. I was 22, independent, and proud. Though I never said it out loud. Pride had always been dangerous in our house. Still, when I crossed that stage, diploma in hand, I looked out into the crowd and saw Michael and Nicole clapping like I'd just changed the world. My parents weren't there. I'd told them the date, of course. They'd had plans. That night, over diner milkshakes, Nicole raised her glass. "You did it, without them." Michael smiled across the booth. "You were never the shadow, Isabella. You just needed the right light." I didn't cry, not then. But later, lying in my small apartment, surrounded by sketches and half-finished designs, I whispered to myself, maybe one day they'll see me. And then, as if answering my own doubt, another voice inside me said, or maybe you'll stop needing them to. It was the first quiet hint of freedom, a seed I didn't yet know would bloom on my wedding day. 3 days before the wedding, my phone lit up with Mom's name. I smiled, hopeful. Maybe she'd ask what color my bouquet was, or what song we'd chosen for the first dance. I answered, breath caught in my throat. "Isabella," she said, her tone clipped, "we won't be attending." I froze. "What? Why?" She sighed, as if I were a child misunderstanding something obvious. Your sister's engagement is this week. Jeffrey's family is taking us to Hawaii. It's a big moment for us. For us, not for her, not for me. She went on. You understand, right? Your wedding's small, intimate. You'll be fine. A trivial event for someone at the bottom. That's what she called it when I pressed her. Her words landed like glass, shattering inside my chest. I ended the call without another word. Michael found me on the couch, phone in hand, eyes blank. They're not coming, I whispered. He sat beside me, pulling me close. Then we make it beautiful without them, he said. The day came. My dress was soft ivory satin, my hands steady only because Michael's were steadier. Nicole flitted around with her camera, capturing laughter, sunlight, the shimmer on the river. I wanted to feel that joy, and for moments I did. But every now and then, I'd glance toward the front row. 2 empty chairs waited like open wounds. During the vows, Michael's voice trembled. I'll never make you feel unseen. That was when I realized that promise meant more to me than any approval I'd ever chased. That night, after the last song faded, I checked my phone. A notification blinked. Mom's new post, celebrating our star's engagement in paradise. A video loaded, them on the beach, laughing, glasses raised, Cheryl flashing her ring. My mother in coral silk, my father's arm around her. They looked radiant. I watched it twice, then again. Each replay blurred into disbelief, then numbness. Nicole found me standing alone near the terrace, the glow from my phone lighting my face. Izzy, she said softly, don't let them steal this night from you. Michael joined us, saw the video, and exhaled sharply. They'll never deserve you. The wind from the river was cold against my skin. I wanted to scream, but what came out was quieter. They chose her again. Michael took my hands. Then choose yourself this time. I looked up at the night sky, tears finally falling, and whispered, maybe this is the last time they get to hurt me. The next morning, I deleted the video, not to forget it, but to stop letting it define me. A week after the wedding, the house was finally quiet. The flowers had wilted, the cake was gone, and the ache of their absence had dulled into something almost livable. Then the phone rang. Dad. His tone was businesslike, not apologetic. Isabella, we need to talk about the loan. I blinked. What loan? The one we took out for your college tuition, he said, as if reminding me of a favor I'd forgotten. It's time you started paying your share. Cheryl's wedding is coming up, and we could use your help with the balance. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard. You're asking me to help pay for Cheryl's wedding? He hesitated. It's only fair. Family supports family. Family. The word burned. The same family that skipped mine, that called my wedding trivial. I'll look into it, I said tightly, then hung up before I could say something worse. That night, I pulled out every folder from the bottom drawer of my desk. Loan documents, payment confirmations, bank records. I'd worked extra jobs, late nights, freelance gigs to cover every cent. There was no unpaid balance, no debt. I called the bank just to be sure. The representative confirmed it. Your loans are fully paid, Miss Reed. No cosigner listed. So it wasn't about money. It was about control. The next day, I called him back. My voice was calm but sharp. I checked the records, Dad. You didn't pay a dime toward my loans. Silence. Then his defensive sigh. You must be mistaken. Cheryl? Don't, I said. Don't use her name to twist this. Mom's voice floated in the background. You should want to help your sister, Isabella. She's family. I almost laughed. Funny. I could have sworn family shows up when you get married. There was another pause, the kind that reveals everything words can't fix. Finally, Dad said stiffly, You're being unreasonable. No, I said quietly. I'm just done being invisible. Before he could respond, I hung up. My hand shook, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was release. When I told Michael, he smiled sadly. They keep changing the rules because you stopped playing the game. Nicole, ever fierce, said, You don't owe them a cent or a single explanation. They were both right. For years, my family had rewritten my story to make themselves comfortable. But now, I had the pen. That night, as I closed my laptop, I whispered to myself, no more guilt, no more permission. And for the first time, the silence that followed didn't feel lonely. It felt earned. The next step wasn't rage, it was clarity. I was done letting their manipulation bleed into my peace, but I didn't want another shouting match. I wanted closure. Nicole said, You should write them, not for them, for you. Michael nodded. Make it official. Draw the line once and never have to again. That's how I ended up in Dr. Pamela Scott's office, the therapist Nicole swore by. The room smelled like eucalyptus and quiet. I told her everything. the favoritism, the wedding, the fake loan, the guilt. When I finished, she said softly, "You've been living as their emotional insurance policy. It's time to cancel the policy." So I did. That night, Michael and I sat at the kitchen table, laptop open. My hands hovered over the keyboard as I thought of every word I'd swallowed over the years. Then I started typing. Joseph, Ruth, and Cheryl, your actions have shown me where I stand in your lives. You chose to miss my wedding, then demanded money to fund someone else's. You dismissed my work, my milestones, my worth. I will no longer participate in this dynamic. Do not contact me again. Any future attempts will be ignored. Isabella. I read it aloud. Simple, clean, unapologetic. Dr. Scott reviewed it the next morning. It's not cruel, she said. It's closure, the kind that doesn't ask for permission. When I hit send, something shifted inside me. A quiet, final snap of an invisible chain. They didn't reply. Not that day or the next. The silence confirmed what I'd always known. Love in our house had been conditional, and I'd finally stopped qualifying. Michael hugged me, whispering, "You did the hardest thing. You stopped waiting for them to change." Nicole showed up with takeout and a grin. "You just broke a generational curse, babe. That deserves noodles." We laughed, the kind of laughter that sounds like air returning to lungs. That night, I deleted their contacts, blocked their numbers, and set my email filter to reroute anything from them straight to the archive. Then I opened my journal and wrote 3 words that felt heavier than any apology they'd never give. I choose me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Silence has a strange way of echoing. For months, I didn't hear a word from Joseph, Ruth, or Cheryl. It was almost eerie at first, like the quiet after a storm when you're not sure if it's really over or just pausing to gather strength. But it wasn't gathering, it was unraveling. The first whisper came from my cousin Mary. She called one afternoon, her tone careful but tinged with satisfaction. "Your parents are in damage control mode," she said. "People finally know what they did." Apparently word had spread about the wedding they skipped, the Hawaii post, the fake loan. My extended family wasn't impressed. Aunts and uncles who'd once praised Ruth's perfect household started keeping their distance. At gatherings, people stopped asking about Cheryl's law career. They asked where I was. For the first time, my name wasn't whispered with pity. It was spoken with respect. Mary told me that during a family barbecue, one of our uncles confronted Joseph directly. "Your daughter built her own life, Joe. You couldn't even show up to celebrate it?" Dad had no answer. He just left early, red-faced. I didn't gloat. I just listened. Calm, distant. Dr. Scott's words echoed in my mind. You're not responsible for the fallout that truth creates. Cheryl's perfect world started cracking too. Mary said her fiancé Jeffrey's family had learned about the skipped wedding. At dinner, his mother apparently asked, "If that's how your parents treat family, how will they treat ours?" Tension followed. Fights. Distance. The glossy engagement photos stopped appearing online. Karma doesn't always arrive loudly. It just rearranges who's left standing. Meanwhile, my life was blooming in quiet, steady ways. My design work was thriving. I'd just landed a contract with a local company that wanted a full rebrand. My boss said, "Your work has heart." Michael and I spent evenings cooking, laughing, planning a future that actually felt like ours. Then, one cool October evening, a test strip turned positive. 2 pink lines. I sat on the bathroom floor, hand over my mouth, a dozen emotions colliding. Shock, joy, disbelief. Michael knelt beside me, eyes wide, then soft. "We're having a baby?" I nodded, tears spilling before I could speak. He hugged me, whispering, "We'll give them the love they never gave you." When I told Nicole, she shrieked so loudly the neighbors probably knew before my parents ever would. George and Diane, Michael's parents, were ecstatic. Diane started knitting tiny blankets that same night. George joked about baby-proofing his entire house. That's when it hit me. I had a family, a real one, built on love, not obligation. Months passed, and the world I'd left behind continued to crumble. Mary still called sometimes with updates, though I never asked for them. "Your mom's been trying to explain herself at reunions," she said once. "No one's buying it. People saw the Hawaii post, Izzy. They know." I didn't feel vindicated, just detached. Their chaos wasn't my burden anymore. When Michael and I painted the nursery, the walls smelled of fresh beginnings. He laughed when I insisted on sketching a mural, soft watercolor clouds drifting above the crib. "Of course you're painting," he said. "It's how you heal." He was right. Every brushstroke felt like rewriting my story from scratch. That night, I stood in the doorway, hand resting on my growing belly, whispering to the quiet room, "You'll never have to beg to be seen." And in that moment, surrounded by color, calm, and love I'd chosen, I finally understood. Their silence wasn't a loss anymore, it was peace. The day my daughter was born, the world went still. Her cry was small, fragile, and yet it felt louder than anything I'd ever achieved. When they placed her in my arms, I whispered her name, Emma. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, and I realized everything I'd chased in my parents, recognition, tenderness, belonging, had found its way back to me through her. Those first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and soft miracles. Michael was beside me through every feeding, every tear, every moment I thought I couldn't do it. Nicole decorated our living room with pastel balloons and Polaroids from the hospital. George and Diane showed up with casseroles and knitted blankets. When Diane kissed my forehead and said, "Your family, Isabella," I believed her completely. For the first time, the word family didn't feel heavy. It felt warm. Mary came by with flowers, telling me how the Reeds were keeping quiet these days. Apparently, the fallout had taken its toll. Social invitations vanished. Cheryl's engagement eventually dissolved, and Joseph and Ruth had retreated into silence. "They're getting what they gave," Mary said gently. I smiled faintly. "I don't wish them pain, just distance." She nodded. "You've earned that." Dr. Scott called to check in once Emma was home. I told her I'd never felt calmer. She said, "That's what happens when you stop living for their apology and start living for your peace." Her words stayed with me. When Emma turned 6 months old, I took her to the park by the river, the same river where I'd said my vows. The air was cool and smelled faintly of honeysuckle. I sat on the bench, sketchbook in hand, her stroller beside me. She laughed when the wind brushed her hair, and I started to draw her. Not the way she looked, but the way she felt. Pure possibility. I thought about that night years ago when I'd stood in a wedding dress staring at an empty chair, waiting for people who would never come. Now I looked down at my daughter and realized the chair was no longer empty. It was filled, 100 times over, by love I'd chosen and created. Sometimes viewers message me after hearing my story online. They say, "I wish I could walk away from my toxic family, but I'm scared." And I tell them what I've learned the hard way. You're allowed to outgrow the people who never learned to love you right. Blood doesn't define loyalty. Presence does. And peace. Peace is something you build yourself. Emma's laughter snapped me out of my thoughts. She was reaching for my sketchbook, chubby fingers smudging the page. I smiled. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Let's make a mess." Michael waved from across the park, coffee in hand, calling out, "My 2 favorite artists." As he joined us, I closed the sketchbook and leaned into him. Everything I had wanted from my old life, love, validation, pride, was right here, simple and real. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was a woman who chose herself and built something beautiful from the silence they left behind. If you're watching this and you've ever felt unseen, know this. You can start again. You can draw new lines, set new colors, and create a family out of the people who show up. Because family isn't who you're born to, it's who helps you heal. And for me, that's Michael, Nicole, Mary, George, Diane, and the little girl who finally made me feel seen.